Hello everyone, I'm Aidan Gallagher coming to you live from the UN headquarters in New York, and I'm honored to be hosting this conversation with UN Secretary General Guterres.
Hello.
Welcome, Secretary General.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we begin, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of this very busy week to talk to Instagram users regarding the environmental crisis.
And I think these are the most important partners in the election. Those that around the world are putting pressure, namely putting pressure on governments to make sure that we are able to defeat climate change.
All right. So, as a UN Environment Goodwill Ambassador, joining young people from around the world, I would like to ask a question on behalf of the millions of youth who marched yesterday to raise awareness for the climate crisis. Mr. Secretary General, what should they do next?
Well, first, it is clear what we need to do. It is clear that we have a climate emergency. It is clear that climate change is running faster than what we are. We see disasters all over the world. We see the sea rising. We see glaciers melting. We see corals bleaching. We see public health being threatened. We see people dying in all kinds of circumstances. So we know what needs to be done. Scientists have told us we need to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees or at 1.5 degrees below until the end of the century, and they need to be carbon neutral in 2050. So we know what needs to be done, but we are not doing it. So what is the next step is to make sure that governments, companies, businesses, but also cities and states behave in a way that allows us to defeat climate change. And that is the reason why we're going to have a summit on Monday. And in that summit, I don't ask for speeches. I ask for each government, each city, each business to come with a commitment to say we are changing course, we are going to respect planet Earth, we are going to fight climate change.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
No. We think more or less the same way. I mean.
All right, so next up, we got a lot of questions from followers on Instagram, and many of them were also on the issue of the climate crisis. So first up, Dan from San Francisco wants to know, which countries are leading the way in combating the climate crisis? What are the positive actions they are taking?
I must say that I'm amazed with what small island developing states are doing. They don't contribute much to climate change. They are the first victims when we see atolls that are at risk of disappearing, when we see terrible storms destroying the economy and many aspects of the society of Caribbean islands or in the Pacific. Those countries that are not contributing to climate change, they are now investing themselves in climate action, in renewables, doing everything possible not to pollute. And that is the best example we have. But I have to say that many other countries are deciding to be carbon neutral in 2050. I see it in Europe, I see it in Africa, I see it in the Americas continent. I see it in some parts of Asia. So there is more and more the conscience that we need to change course. And I see countries that are putting a price on carbon, that are taxing carbon instead of taxing people. I see more and more countries taking out subsidies to fossil fuels, and that is absolutely essential. I see more and more businesses that are adapting to become carbon neutral. I see more and more asset owners, those that manage the money, the pension funds and others, that are taking their money out of fossil fuel companies. So lots of things are happening, but it's not enough. We are not doing enough. We are still lagging behind. Climate change is still winning the race.
Next up, we have a question from Venezuela. What would you recommend that people in nations of crisis, for example, Venezuela, can do to fight climate change?
Well, first of all, they can do it in their lives every day. There are many things we do, the way we eat, the way we move, that have a contribution to climate change. We can do it ourselves. We can help our communities. But dialogue for peace is also very important to create the conditions for countries to be able to fight climate change. And in Venezuela, we need more dialogue for peace.
Next up, we have a question from Tegan, who's one of my Instagram followers from the UK. Do you think young activists and protesters are being heard in getting the attention from the people?
They are being heard. I'm not sure they have received all the attention that they should, but they are being heard. The media everywhere is putting them in front pages, is putting them in the opening of news. They really are making a difference. And I must say, my biggest hope in relation to the capacity of the world to change course is to see the youth so determined and to see more and more, my generation, understanding that things need to change.
Now, we also got lots of questions regarding other topics, such as peace and security. Mohammed says, every month a lot of people and children are killed in conflict. What is the UN doing to protect the lives of people in conflict?
Well, we have peacekeeper operations in some countries, from the Democratic Republic of Congo to South Sudan, Central African Republic, and peacekeepers are sometimes being killed protecting people and avoiding civilians to be killed. But the most important is to prevent conflicts and to solve conflicts. And I have to say that in our present world, it's becoming more and more difficult. We see power relations becoming unclear. We see lots of spoilers. When you have a country like Libya, for instance, with the civil war, lots of other countries are interfering and arming the two sides, even if there is an arms embargo. And so the fact that more and more countries are misbehaving is making our life more difficult, both to prevent conflicts and to solve them. And so it is absolutely essential that international law is respected, international humanitarian law is respected, and that's absolutely essential that the Security Council, where the key countries in the world are represented, is able to unite to make sure that peace is guaranteed in areas where unfortunately we struggle to preserve it or we struggle to establish it.
Another question that came up. What can the UN do about the rise of extremism, which often targets young people, especially through social media?
We have launched now a UN global campaign against hate speech. It's totally intolerable what we see. Internet, the digital economy, the digital society are a fantastic potential. We need to use it. We are on Instagram. But this can also be used for horrible things and for hate, can talk for people against people. And so it's absolutely essential that we do everything possible in order to make sure that the digital world is at the service of harmony, is at the service of peace, is at the service of mutual understanding, and that we create the mechanisms that, respecting the freedom of expression, allow mutual respect to be more and more what prevails in the way we communicate with each other, namely through the modern digital platforms that exist.
Now switching to the topic of migration, Diego asks, how is the UN working to end stigma around immigrants, migrants?
We are totally committed to the protection of human rights of migrants. And to give clearly a message, migration is not a negative thing. Migration is one of the components to solve the problems around the world. We have big differences in demography. Some countries have aging populations, very low birth rates. Other countries have very high birth rates. It's normal. For instance, my mother is 96 years old in a country like Portugal, that is not one of the richest countries in the world. And when I visit my mother, there is always someone taking care of her, and most of them are foreigners, most of them are migrants. So we need migrants. If we need migration, then the best way is to organize it, to make sure that countries work together to have regular legal migration instead of allowing traffickers and smugglers that terribly violate human rights of people to be the ones managing migration flows around the world. Migration is a positive thing, it needs to be positively addressed, and we need international cooperation for that.
A user from Nigeria asks, the Sustainable Development Goals are very ambitious. Now, they are a very ambitious plan to make the world better, but looking at the news these days, things can seem to be getting worse. So how realistic is it to think that we'll actually achieve the goals by 2030? And what can each of us do?
Well, things are not getting worse. There is a reduction of poverty in the world, there is a reduction in infant mortality, there is an increase of people in schools in the world. Things are not getting worse, but they are not moving fast enough. We have looked into the global statistics with a team of experts, and we have discovered that at the present way of doing things, we will reach 2030 not having achieved the Sustainable Development Goals, but at half. So we need to accelerate. We need to do more. We need to mobilize more resources, more capacities. We need to have governments more committed, societies more organized, and especially we need money. We need to make sure that the international financial system, that development cooperation mechanisms, that international solidarity allows developing countries to make the investments that are necessary to achieve in education, in health, in the reduction of poverty, in improving agriculture, in preserving the oceans, in fighting climate change, that developing countries have the resources necessary to achieve those goals.
Gender equality is also one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, one of our users from Italy says, women still face sexism every day. How can we end this and finally achieve gender equality?
Well, we live in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture, and in my opinion, the best way to reverse this is to achieve gender parity. So we must, in all institutions, and we are doing it in the UN, I have now gender parity in my senior management group. We have gender parity in those that lead UN teams around the world. It's half-half. And we will be having gender parity across the board in 2028. And we have plans in each department to make sure that we get there. Now, if we have gender parity in the UN, if we have gender parity in governments, in parliaments, in the boards of companies, then power relations will change, and then finally gender equality can be a possibility in today's world.
Next, let's turn to you and your career for a moment. Sabrina wants to know, you originally graduated with a degree in engineering. Now, one wouldn't normally associate this degree with someone who wants to get into politics. When and how did you decide to pursue a political career? Were there any defining moments that made you make a decision?
Well, when I was a student, Portugal was still in a dictatorship at the time, and there was a lot of poverty and slums in Lisbon. And I was part of a youth Catholic movement that were working in some of those slums, trying to help people in education, in health, in different other aspects. And I felt the terrible shock of this injustice, of the oppression, terrible conditions of life for large parts of the population of my own country. And I felt that I was privileged, I had the best possible education, the best support from, so I needed to do something to reverse these tragedies that I was witnessing, and I decided to get into politics. I was lucky that we had a revolution, we had a new democracy, the youth was very strongly involved, there were lots of opportunities for young people like me at the time to intervene politically, and so that became my first period of activism, politics. And then when at a certain moment I discovered that I had reached the limit of what I could do in political life, I left and I went into humanitarian work. I was High Commissioner for Refugees during more than 10 years, supporting refugees all over the world. And then I also understood that just to support the refugees is not enough. We need to do something to avoid the situations that force people to flee. And that is why I presented myself as a candidate for Secretary General now. I mean, what this shows is that what we learn in the university is not so important. What it is important is to learn how to learn and to be able to adapt during our life to the circumstances we face, to be able to do in any moment what we believe is the right thing to do, especially to support those that were much less privileged than what we are.
Now finally, many of your young followers are very supportive of the UN. Lily wants to know, how can we build a stronger UN and unite the world?
To build a stronger UN, it's very important that societies themselves engage with the UN and that there is a voice given to societies and to the youth. And that is why we are having, for instance, a youth summit before our climate summit. The UN is, of course, an organization of governments, but if we want to strengthen it, we must make it more and more an organization of people. And we must give voice to people and must give people influence in the work of the UN and the decisions that are taken in the different UN institutions.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have. On behalf of the Instagram viewers watching, I'd like to thank you, Secretary General, for taking the time to answer these questions.
Thank you very much and all the best to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Great pleasure also.